If you're looking for your next summer read and you like a good crime novel, we've got you sorted with a little help from two authors who know the genre inside out.
Chris Hammer is an internationally best-selling author. His latest book, Treasure and Dirt, was published during Canberra's recent lockdown. And Loraine Peck is a new author whose novel, The Second Son, picked up the Ned Kelly Award for Best Debut Crime Fiction. We'll chat about their books and get a few of their recommendations as well. Welcome to you both.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us. Good morning.
Good to have you along. Loraine, I want to start with you and ask you both, what was it like publishing during a pandemic?
Well, as I've never been published before, I don't really have a great term of reference, but obviously the lead up to publication, you go and meet all the booksellers and go to conferences. Well, I couldn't do any of that because it was 2020. But when my book came out in 2021 in February, I did get to have a launch party before everything kind of got locked down again. So, you know, good and bad. And obviously getting a Ned Kelly Award is amazing. But, you know, I could have been in a room full of famous authors like Chris Hammer, but I had to do my acceptance speech pre-recorded on video, which saved me from doing a complete Gwyneth Paltrow and melting down on stage. So that was probably a good thing. Silver linings.
Yeah. Well, and Chris, I saw you nodding away there. What was it like for you publishing in a pandemic of this, the latest in your series?
Look, really strange, Dan. I had this wonderful book tour lined up. You know, I was going to travel for a month and I did nothing. But about a month ago, there was a crime writing festival in Sydney and we could all make that. That's where I met Loraine. We had a fantastic time, kind of in between lockdowns. So no book tour, just got very good at doing Zoom and Skype and interviews like this.
Loraine, what sort of interest has there been in your book, considering that we are in a pandemic and you haven't been able to do all of those tours and guest appearances and festivals and the like?
Well, I think I've been extremely lucky considering how tough it's been on debut authors, both in 2020 and 2021. I've got a great publishing house in text publishing, and the crime community of writers is incredibly inclusive. So I felt like I belonged very early because authors were reaching out to me, and everyone who reads the book keeps asking me for the sequel. So I'm working really hard to deliver that now.
Yeah, right. You got your work cut out for you immediately. Chris, by extension,
Yeah.
that same question, you've got a point of reference, having published other books. What's it been like, the interest, the sales, the uptake?
Sales have been actually really good this year. My book, Treasure and Dirt, has been doing very well. I do feel, though, it's much more difficult for debut authors, authors who are just coming onto the scene, because, as you yourself said, it's very important to get out, to meet booksellers, to go to writers' festivals, to meet readers. Books overall are doing well. And I think, you know, this summer, a lot of people are thinking, instead of some sort of elaborate travel, you know, a beach and a book somewhere sounds about perfect.
Now, Treasure and Dirt, your latest book, is your first standalone. You'd had a long-running series where we'd been jettisoned all over different parts of Australia. What were you saying with this book?
Well, once again, we're in an opal mining town. Think Lightning Ridge, just smaller and wilder. It is a standalone. But I've been so kind of captured by the characters myself that I'm now working on a follow-up book to it. So hopefully out, you know, maybe the end of this year.
And tell us about your book, Loraine, The Second Son, and about where that's set and about the grittiness of, well, the Sydney underworld.
Yes, well, it has been referred to as a modern-day Godfather, which I'm very grateful. It's set in the mean streets of Western Sydney, and it's about a crime family, a Croatian crime family, and the eldest son is gunned down in the street while he's putting out the bins, which is what happens in Western Sydney sometimes. And the second son has to step up Now, he's married to a nice middle-class Aussie chick who has to protect their son at all costs. So it's a story about being torn apart from your duty to your crime family and your duty to your own family, and how that marriage gets impacted by crime.
Yeah, it's got something for everyone. Just before we move on to what are your favourite books of the year, I wonder why you think there's been such a resurgence and greater interest in this genre. Joe was talking about it earlier and touched on perhaps the sense of escapism, or that I wonder if it's because everything is so dire when it comes to COVID-19 news around Australia and around the world, that crime novels are maybe seen as not as bad.
Yeah, maybe so. I think too, everyone enjoys being scared a little bit, don't they? We're all fascinated by criminals, which is why I'm going to tend to work with criminals, I think, rather than police as the main characters in my books, because I find them really fascinating. And I think most of the public do too.
And Chris, what about you? What have you found?
I think part of it's just a good story. Also characters, also setting. But the thing about crime fiction is you can have all sorts of different things including, you know, from time to time, different sort of insights into the state of society, you know, without getting too serious about it. That's the beauty of the crime fiction genre. It can be so wide and include so many different aspects, and hopefully you know, all those different parts come together so the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Loraine, you've given us a long list of books that have been great ones that you've read. What's at the top of the list?
The top of my list is Candace Fox, The Chase. What happens when 600 violent American criminals are let loose on the public during a massive jailbreak? Well, it's mayhem, obviously, and one of those escapees is desperately trying to prove his innocence, while the rest of them are just being super duper bad. This is an action-packed thrill ride, dynamite from one of the very best in the business, Candace Fox.
And Chris, what about for you? What topped your list?
The Housemate by Sarah Bailey. She's a fantastic crime author. She did 3 books. Here it is here. She did 3 books with Gemma Woodcock as her protagonist, a police officer. But in this new book, the main protagonist is a journalist, Ollie Groves. And I've got to say, Dan, you know, as a former journalist, you're a journalist, wow, does Sarah ever nail the idea of what it's like to be a journo on the hunt for a story. This is a great book, and the crime part of it is very intriguing, but really what drives it is these fantastic, fascinating, intriguing characters.
Just before I let you go, I want to just stick with that line of thinking around journalism being the centre of books. That was at the forefront of your earlier series. It was the centrepiece of the Marmalade Files, of Tim Ayleff's series as well, and a whole range of other books. What is it about journalism that you think throws it so far into the front and makes it such a meaty centrepiece?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is a lot of crime books are written by journalists or former journalists, myself, Michael Rowbotham, Jane Harper, you mentioned Tim Ayleff, Michael Brisington, Chris Hillman and Steve Lewis. The great thing about having a journalist as a protagonist is a journalist is allowed to stick their nose in where it's not wanted. It's part of their job to investigate like baddies or corruption or whatever it is without the constraints of being a police officer. So I think a journalist is, a very good protagonist.
Yeah, very good. Well, we'll be looking forward to both of your next books coming out. Thank you so much for joining us here on Weekend Breakfast there, Chris Hammer and Loraine Peck. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks for having us, Dan.
I've written down a few of those titles for my summer readings.
Some great reading there, and the names that they were mentioning, and even just some of those other authors. For incredible work. So particularly in the last couple of years.